Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless leader and host, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist for I Protect Insurance and Financial Services, based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Mobile, Alabama. Parade first team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
Listeners, Scott just told me a minute ago that he needed to reschedule our 2 o'clock podcast because he has to hop on a Zoom call to pitch a nice size account, right?
About 70.
Yeah, a nice size account. So we're going to move it to later. So in a few weeks, you will hear whether he got the account or not.
Yeah, you probably will. That's exactly right.
Can I tell you a story that Clint told me? Can we talk about it? Can we break it down?
Please.
So Clint and I were on the phone the other day, and you don't know that we talked about this. So Clint and I were on the phone. And we were talking about prospecting business. We were just having like a sales, Jeff, like just a sales conversation, right? And I said, Scott is the most naturally gifted person at being confident enough to ask anybody about their insurance.
Yeah.
And you really are.
Yeah.
Like there's a Thai place down the street here that I eat at least once a week.
Why don't you get your insurance with us?
And I eat there all the time, and Scott goes there a couple times with me, and he's like, talks the guy into letting us look at their insurance, And I was telling Clint the story.
Well, I had a guy up front right now I've been talking to.
So one of the reasons we were late is we had a walk-in today. All right, when somebody walks into my office, it's either somebody wanting insurance or we're being robbed, and we usually assume we're being robbed. We get no walk-ins.
Or the homeless guy needing the bathroom.
And this older gentleman walks in with his insurance policies in his hand, and Scott's out there talking to him. And I told Jeffrey I just had to remove myself. My anxiety was through the roof. I'm joking.
No, those are my people right there, man.
I know.
I'm in my sweet spot right there.
Are you sure you weren't looking for I Protect Insurance? But anyway, I was talking to Clint, and Clint said, have I ever told you what Scott did at my wedding?
Oh, no, I don't remember what this.
I said no, but I want to hear that story. I need you to corroborate this.
Okay.
Clint says Scott is giving a speech at his wedding.
Yep.
And you said, and I respect this so much, but it's also funny. Right. At the end of the speech, you said something to the effect of, and I've saved this for this podcast. Hey, while I got y'all here, if anybody needs any help with auto, home, or life insurance, remember the insuranceguy.online.com. Is that a true story, or was he messing with me?
Yes, I do believe I did that at the very. Now I did it jokingly, obviously.
Yeah. But it's a joke. But
certain people can get away with stuff. Certain people can't.
Yeah. But I was like, man, I love that so much because you can do it as a joke, but then there's also some people in there that are probably like, you know what, we ought to reach out to that guy. Remember that dude at that wedding?
State Farm so-and-so just denied my claim. Hey, yeah, I am going to call you. Yeah, that's right. Hey, Bradley, I got a funny story just real fast, and then we're going to get our all-star guest on today who I have not laid eyes on since January of 2021, so I'm excited to – was it 21 or 23?
22.
22. Okay, I'm sorry.
No. Was it 23? It was
23.
23, January 23. Yeah, that's when I remember us hanging out together. This morning I got up at 5 and I went and walked a mile before I went downstairs to the hotel. And of course, none of the coffee's ready because it's like 5:08. But, went to the restaurant and they're like, well, we've got coffee, but it's decaf. And I'm like, I don't want decaf. So I just went on a walk around downtown. Like I do it almost every morning I'm here. I'll just go on a walk, and there is nobody out. Nobody. Except the street sweeper guy in his truck sweeping the street. And I make the block, and I'm coming down Dolphin Street. And no. I'm coming down the street. No, that's Dolphin Street. Next to it's on the right side of the block where I'm at, and I look up at the sign, and it's Bass Underwriters.
Yeah,
that's not the funny part of the story, though. Here comes the funny part of the story. And I thought, well, hell, we write a bunch of business with Bass Underwriters. I'm gonna take a picture of just I don't know, for whatever reason.
They just increased our commission.
Yeah. I was going to take a selfie because the sign is one of those hanging signs.
It's a beautiful office.
Yeah. I bet. Yeah, it's a beautiful building. But I was going to take this picture, and so I see the sign in front of me, and I kind of glanced over, but I'm looking up at the window and inside, and I get right up under the sign. And right before I'm going to take my selfie, I just happened to glance down, and there's a homeless guy asleep, and he starts stirring around. And it was like being in a cage with a wild animal. I was like, oh, my God.
It's like you're in the woods.
Like jumping out of the way.
It's like you're in the woods and you walked up on a rattlesnake.
It's like I walked in somebody's hotel room and they're in bed. You know, that kind of thing. It was crazy. Anyway, guys, I got a very special guest on the show today. Got to hang out with him. This guy's a Renaissance man. I love unique individuals. And we have a unique individual on this podcast today. I want to give him the introduction he's always deserved. He's originally from Birdsboro, Pennsylvania, and he currently resides in Manchester, Vermont. I have never been to Vermont. I've been everywhere. Mm-hmm. Got into the insurance game at age 31 after getting sober and having his son, Jericho. And before that, all he ever did was construction. Had back surgery at age 27. I got an employee, just had double back surgery after working for UPS, slinging boxes for about 15 years.
That'll do it.
Kept doing construction until his son was born, but could no longer stand the pain. He's traveled to about 20 different countries in his 20s, drove a motorcycle through Nepal and back. From 23 to 31, he lived in a small cabin way out in the woods, my dad, that nobody lived in for 50 years before he bought it. He worked for State Farm for 2 months before he started seeing more insurance than the rest of the office combined with no previous professional experience. He worked for State Farm for 6 months, and then he moved to Vermont during COVID to be close to his son and started his own insurance agency. Today, he is the president and CEO of Northshire Insurance in Manchester, Vermont. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound honor today to introduce to you first-time guest on the IGP, Mr. Jeffrey Seidel. How are you, Jeffrey?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me so much.
Hey, been a hot minute since you and I was at the bar drinking and talking shop down in Austin, Texas.
I wasn't drinking, but you guys were.
Boy, yeah, that's right. Excuse me, I was heavily that night. I apologize.
Yeah. Was that the first night?
That was, it was the first night.
My head hurt.
That first night was that room that I think David Carruthers sponsored that.
That's right. That's right.
That was a cool place.
Yeah, there was a lot of love in that room that night.
Yeah.
There's times and snapshots of moments in your life you wish you could recreate, and that was one of them in my life.
Yeah.
So many good people in that room, so much fun, so many good conversations.
You rolled up in a DeLorean.
That's right. I did. Yeah, that's right.
That was That was a fun that
whole trip was fun.
It was. The work leading up to that is not fun.
No.
But that if anybody wants to throw Bradley and Scott a couple $100,000 and not be scared that you're never going to see it again, we'll do another one of those.
You know what? I wonder why some carrier or insurtech that's flush with cash doesn't do that.
You know, it's funny
because we could easily, if we had 8 months of
leeway,
lead time.
It was funny. The first day I had a lady come, and I think I've told this on the podcast, but I had a lady come up to me after you did the DeLorean. I think I spoke, Troy spoke, and then I think Ciara was up there. This lady came up to me, and she was one of the heads of one of the conferences for a management system. I'm not going to say which one. And she says, "Can I ask you a question?" Sure. She's like, I go to all these state association events. We put all these events on. How do you, like, the energy here is unmatched. Like, how do you create that? And I told her, I said, can I think about that and Get back with you tomorrow.
Which is like, a very mature response to that question.
And I went back the next day, and this is advice for anybody out there putting on an event. Events are a pain in the butt to put on.
Yeah.
It's awful. And you can, if you want, make a lot of money on an event. And in some ways you feel like you need to because it's so much work. But I told her the next day, I said, I think I have the answer for you. The answer is that almost every dollar that comes into here is put back into the event to make that attendee experience better, because you have a balance, right? You can't put an event on without sponsors, right? You have to charge your sponsors enough that you can put on a good event for your attendees, but you have to sell enough tickets so that your sponsors feel that they're getting their money's worth. But you can't have your sponsors be so overbearing that your attendees are like, oh my gosh, I'm getting pitched every time I look to my left, right, or look to my right. And we don't have to have Scott come in a DeLorean, right? We don't have to have a Food Network chef do the lunch, which we did that day. We don't have to give our VIP ticket purchasers custom shoes with their agency logos on it. We don't
rolling.
We don't have to have a guy rolling custom cigars. We don't have to have insurance themed events. Insurance themed drinks at the bar, which we did. The BOR, one of my favorite drinks ever, right? But you do all those little bitty things is what makes
it's like a relationship with your wife, if you can half-ass it or you can go over the top, and she's like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody bats an eye at flowers on Valentine's, correct. But you send flowers on March 28th, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, this is so unexpected. It's like all those little things. But the catch is all those little things cost money. So if you're putting an event on to make money, like
you're losing.
And I'll be transparent with you guys. Scott and I's net profit on One City World Tour Austin was $7,100.
Yeah, boy, we're rolling in cash over here.
Not worth it. Like that's basically what I make when I do a speaking engagement that somebody pays me to go speak at. It's not worth it for the work.
That's enough money to make off the damn.
Yeah. And the first
6 months he worked, and by the way, and I said this at the event. I said it. Jeffrey, you may remember, I stood up and I thanked Bradley and said, "Dude, this is all Bradley."
I think you thanked everybody in that building about 6 times.
Yeah.
Well,
and then the first year, so the first One City World Tour, we made $2,000. The only reason we made $2,000, we had it at Denver Broncos Stadium, and Denver Broncos Stadium charged us. I'm surprised they did not charge us to turn the air conditioner on.
To walk through the parking lot.
They charged us for every little bitty thing, and one of the things we paid for was for the insurance guy's music, the theme song, to be played through the stadium. Have I ever told you this?
No.
We paid for, when you walked out of the suite, it was playing, dun, 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 the insurance guy's music, and they forgot to turn it on. And we paid $2,000 for that.
They sure did forget it.
We paid $2,000 for that. And so we were actually break even on the event. And I complained to them because they charged me for every little thing, so they gave me $2,000 back. That's the only reason we made $2,000 on that event.
Right.
So it takes a lot to put those on, and this was not what we're going to talk about. But I say all that to say, if there's any big sponsor out there that wants to throw a couple $100,000 at us, and we put a freaking shindig on, hit me up.
You know who needs to
make it happen?
You know who needs to do that? I'm gonna throw out whatever. One of these excess and surplus lines brokers, because originally I was thinking like the Big I or the PIA National,
like a Gen Cap or somebody like that.
But the problem with like the Big I and the PIA is they're going to want to be in control of everything.
Yeah,
we need somebody like an RPS, a Gen Cap, an AmWinds that's flush with cash, because they're making. I mean, every week they're getting another, 9% growth in excess and surplus. That just says, all right, guys, here's the money. Here's the money. We're going to be the title sponsor. Y'all mention us 10 times. We'll get up and say a few words, but y'all control it all. You do all the cigar rolling and and because I don't want to do it with somebody that's going to be like, okay, we'll pay for it, but we want control of everything.
Well, I'll tell you a story.
I mean?
I'll tell you a story that I've never told on the podcast.
Oh, no.
So one of our larger sponsors, paid us quite a bit of money. It was $20,000 to be like one of the premier sponsors. And they started, this is Austin, they started a couple weeks before trying to call the shots, pushing us around. They were sponsoring an after hours event, and they were very rude to my event planner, who's the nicest person on the face of the planet. And I call, and they asked for proof of what we were paying for the party, like just super rude. So, and I called them. This is a large company, and I said, "Hey, I need an address." And they said, well, "What do you need an address for?" I said, "I'm about to send you a check for $20,000, and you can go screw yourself." And that's not what I said. I'm PG in it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to you're not going to tell me what, you're not going to push me, or like, you're not, we're going to do business like nice human beings that can get along like this. And you could tell that nobody had ever said that before, because so many of these conferences, and I was like, look, I'll take the hit. If I think I called you and said, look, if this ends up, I'll take the hit. We were magically able to work it out, but you run into a lot of that. With this, where you get somebody, it's like a politician, man, taking special interest money. All of a sudden, the tail wants to wag the dog.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, we might have to edit that out, but
whatever.
If you're in the trenches in insurance, you need to be used to having those kinds of conversations.
Yeah. Don't let anybody push you around.
Hey, Jeffrey, I read your bio. You are a wildly interesting person, but I got to know. Because, I know you were in construction and then you got into the industry, and it wasn't long after that we met over at the One City World Tour. And I've thought about you, a handful of times since then. So climb in my DeLorean right now and go back to January of 2022 when you and I were together down in Austin. You came to the One City World Tour. You went back to Vermont, and talk to our audience a little bit about what's happened in your life and then in your agency's life since we were together down there, because, it feels like that was yesterday, but that was, 3 or 4 years ago now. So I want to hear what's been going on since then.
Well, I was only even open about a year before that.
Right.
So there's been a lot going on. COVID restrictions was the big thing. So navigating, negotiating, all that. I live in Vermont. There's, I have a town of 4,000 permanent residents, probably 10,000 non-permanent. There's a couple agencies here. I'm the first one that opened a new independent agency in probably 50 years that didn't inherit it. We don't have little gatherings of insurance agents here.
Right.
Nobody's getting along. If you did,
it would be a little gathering.
Yeah. So I hang out with the realtors up here. I go to their events, amazing groups. It's amazing seeing all those people in their industry getting along and having their events. So for me, I need to go down there, rub shoulders, and like submerge myself in the insurance world. And just seeing, you guys and talking to David, and I was hanging out with Charles and Ron down there. And it just like, I'm in part of this. This is great, because up here, I'm just in my own little bubble.
Yeah.
I think you got the people trying to walk in the office here. And
I think you also meant, because you're in such a small town and there's 2, 3, 4 other independent agents there. Tell me if I'm wrong, but there's no love lost there. It's not like y'all are going to chop it up over lunch. It's like,
no,
I'm going to stay in my office and you stay in your office, and which, by the way, is very common among agents in a geographical area, because, you're right down the street from each other and you are competition. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's different. It's just different. Right?
Well, yeah. I mean, dude, like it's different when it's your competition.
Correct. Local, so, like down the street.
Scott and I a day does not go by that somebody that listens to this podcast doesn't reach out. But when I look at statistics of the podcast downloads, Alabama is always in the top 2 or 3 of downloaded states.
Wow.
And it's almost never an Alabama agent reaches out.
Right.
Because it's your competition.
Wow. Right.
You know what I mean?
Just
Like
listening.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I found all of my competition on Facebook and blocked them right away.
That's smart.
Just because that's how I was marketing. I was doing
Right.
so
Yeah.
good there.
I'll tell you one thing you can do. I did this. I actually talked about this last week at a workshop. You know, you can create custom feeds in Facebook. So you can go through, and I had a VA do this for me. She went through my Facebook friends list and put everybody in one of 2 categories, insurance and non-insurance. And you can do
Nice.
2 things when you put your friends in these categories. You can do 2 things. You can, when you go on your main feed, like when you're looking at everybody's posts.
Wait, is this your portal page or your
No, personal page.
individual-
Personal page.
page.
So
Okay.
you can change the feed to non-insurance, and then you can engage with all the non-insurance posts. So and so you can also do
Right.
this. I've done this for recruiting too. So anybody that I want to hire that's local here, I put them in a category, and so I can change my feed so I can very quickly engage with their post to try to build that relationship.
So you can
Right.
toggle.
The other thing you can do though is when you create a post, it's kind of like when you block somebody from a post, you can create a post that only this group of friends see.
Yeah.
Ah.
So if I want to post something that I only want insurance people to see, I can post that only to insurance people. My personal people don't see it.
Right.
You can do the inverse too. So you can post things. If let's say we've got some like catchy marketing thing that we're doing and I don't want my competition to see it, which is pretty rare. I usually like my competition to see that because I want them to see how I'm beating them, you know, and try to figure out how to do it themselves, because there's nothing funnier than somebody trying to copy you. But
Yeah.
I can say if if we've got some like catchy post that I know is going
Right.
to work and catch on, I'll do it to just my non-insurance people. So that's another thing you can do where you can kind of still keep your eye on your competition without actually blocking them.
Does that help your engagement or anything on Facebook to do
It probably
that?
hurts it, but you can just be very targeted with
Yeah,
who you're, you know what I
right.
mean? You know how when you see somebody post something and you'll see somebody in the comments that say, can you make this shareable? Like if a post is not shareable, that means it was posted in a way that there was someone or some group of people that could not see it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Sorry for that's
So-
just a little bit of free game there.
So Jeffrey, it sounds as though just me reading between the lines, you snuggled up to some of the real estate people there, or a lot of them there, and that's a great lead generator for you up in Vermont. Or, you know, these real estate agents calling or emailing you or texting you, hey man, I got a guy buying a house. You want to call him and try to insure it or whatever? Is that kind of where you are with it?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of first I do get it. I get a lot out of that group and just the relationships. Like I feel like I have some kind of like coworkers up here, you know,
Right.
and I'm not just like, this lone wolf. So it does feel good. And some of the agents I've actually just become really good friends with. And up here, they have to, like, if they're going to recommend anybody, they have to recommend a few people. So I just do the best I can. I'm not keeping track of who's sending what's happening. My phone rings at this agency almost all day, almost every day. When we have a slow day, we go, thank God,
Right.
There's no like, oh, it's a slow day, let's strum up some business. We're like, ooh, let's take a breather.
Right.
And I honestly have to credit most of that to the learning what I've learned about SEO. And I'll be honest, I got most of that from Uncle Ron Wadley.
Yeah.
Like, being up here in this setting, the bar is set so low that it's been so easy for me to go in there, work my website, change my website, just keep it up to date. It's like, it's so, every 3 months now I go in and just do a little bit of work and the phone keeps ringing. And, we do a lot of secondary homes.
I bet.
And so that can get a little tricky, with ratios and stuff like that with the carriers. But yeah, I get a lot out of that, but most importantly, what helped my agency get where it's at now was hitting the ground as hard as I possibly could in the very beginning, getting those Google reviews up, and being a contender on the state level for Vermont. I think I have the second highest reviews in Vermont.
Hey, I have to congratulate you on something.
What's that?
So you started your agency, I know, in 2021, right?
Mm-hmm.
What month?
May.
Okay. Congratulations. This is a big day. I'm about to tell you why. I had an old head in insurance tell me one time back around 2010, 2011, and I never forgot him saying this to me. He said, Scott, when you open up your agency, when you hit your 5-year anniversary, which I believe 21, 22, 23, 24, May of 25, you will hit your 5-year anniversary. If you can hit your 5-year anniversary, you'll be in insurance for life. So congratulations, brother.
Thank you.
You were like 2 months away from hitting that. It's almost like climbing to the tallest point of Mount Everest. Like you get to 5 years, you're going to stay in it for life. If you don't get to 5 years, obviously you go do something else. Have you ever heard that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jeffrey might be thinking, crap, I don't want to do this the rest of my
he's
life.
like, damn, I don't want to be in this forever.
I tell my son, I got his desk back here behind me. Sure. This is all yours.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned on here getting sober, having your son, driving, 5 hours to go see him. Like Scott has a son from another marriage. Yep. I have a daughter. I make an hour and a half drive one way to go pick her up. There's probably some listeners that deal with that. Like, talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. When she left with him, I was freaking out. And when I had to have that back surgery, I was, putting everything in me and to make the pain go away.
Sure.
And I got put on opiates. And when I got off those opiates within a year, I didn't like the way they made me feel, but they took me to an extra level of numb that is much harder to reach with anything else. So alcohol. And, little by slow, I found myself drinking. And then, I would say, like, did I say that? And she'd be like, yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to stop. So I said that for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And then when she left, I was like, I can't let anything get in the way of being a father to that kid. I could go into more details, but I won't. But, when he was born, I was just like instantly bawling. And I had this one opportunity when he was, when she was leaving at 6 months old. I looked at him. I talked to him like he was a grown adult. And I said, Jericho, I will do everything I can to be there for you. And that meant that I had to put some work in.
Yeah.
And I tried it on my own. I was out in the woods. I was hiking around. I started riding my bike 15 to 40 miles a day. And then I'd still get in the car and go down to the local bar. I'd be like lonely in this little cabin. And we had just a few local bars, but they were all within like 2 or 3 miles of my little cabin. It's so easy to go down there. I'm just going to get a burger, And then I would get drunk and say tomorrow. And eventually I went into a program, and it was wild. It was like, I believe in God, especially now. I got down on my knees in my yard and I prayed. I had this moment. I started bawling, I turned my back to you, God, and, I want you to come in and help me with these things, help me be a father. And I just had this moment. It was like going to like your dad after not talking to him for like 10 years and you've just been ruining your life, Dad, I'm sorry, take me back. And I feel like I got a promise that if I do what I had to do, And for me, it was like a lot more than just alcohol. You know, it was like making excuses in my life, pushing myself a little farther. But in a way, I was like an overzealous father. Like when that court told me I can only see him every other weekend, because she was able to move up here. It's about 5.5 hours, 6 hours difference. So they picked a spot in North Jersey. Well, I went up to North Jersey and I made a whole fellowship there. And one of the people that I met is a guy named Tim Jackson. And he was like a high level CEO. He was selling reverse mortgages. I had a man bun with sticks in my hair and, you know, a scraggly beard. And this guy became my friend, and we would talk every single day. And we talk about God. We talk about staying sober. And then he was like, after we got through that, he's like, Jeff, what's your credit score like? You know, I was like, I don't even know what that is. You know, I was 31. I didn't have a credit score. And he started with that. And then he's like, so what are you going to do the rest of your life? You're going to do construction? And what can you do? And I was like, well, my uncle sells insurance. And I called my uncle, and he said, you know, you could get into that. He said, I would hire you. He goes, Jeff, you could sell ice to an Eskimo. And I was like, all right. So, which I didn't know about myself. I'll be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Like, the construction thing was hard at times, and a lot of times I would just sell myself short, pick up a subcontracting job, work for $20 an hour, and, you know, because I didn't have to do all the write-ups and everything. So I started with him for like a week at a farmer's agency, and every single one of my friends, believe it or not, at that time, I had no friends with good credit. So I couldn't do a quote with them, and talk to my sponsor, and he was like, hey, man, you should try just getting a job, not through family. So I went to the interview, and I didn't have like nice insurance clothing or anything. I had like this weird polka dotted shirt and some yellow pleated pants and some loafers from Walmart. And I go in and I sit down and I talk to this guy. His name's Rick Oreo. I'll give him a shout out for an hour, and I tell him my whole life story about, you know, why I want to do better. And he looked at me and he's like, you know, I know some people just like you. I'm gonna give you a chance. And I left there like, I'm gonna do everything I can to learn this stuff. And I went in, and you know, State Farm lays out everything for you. They give it to you on a silver platter.
Right.
But you know, I did things like I had made my own business cards that didn't say State Farm on them, and
sure.
I hand them out. And you know, Rick was like, you can't do this. I was like, come on. Every chance I had, I was out there telling people to let me quote them. I was working my phone, my Facebook, old friends. Hey guys, I'm trying to get my life together. Will you give me an opportunity? I don't care if you buy. I just want the opportunity to try.
Right.
And I would just mass send this out. And, you know, State Farm has a tier on like, you get this many policies, you get paid this much. And so I was trying to hit that. And yeah, within 2 months, like it turns out that I could do that. Like and it was what a breath of fresh air, because I had no idea. When you're slinging hammers and covered in dirt and, you know, brick dust from 1895 all day, you dream about that. You think there's all these conversations between contractors, like maybe one day I'll just get a desk job, you know? And but it's a matter of believing in yourself. And then
and sometimes it takes those other people to see things in you that you can't see.
Absolutely. There's a whole list of people. Yeah. And Rick, you know, I had an opportunity where I could sell my house, invest into another business, which helped me give me the money, the foundation to start this business, and give me a nice little platform to set my life up on. And so I took that opportunity and I explained everything to Rick. Like, I got to get near my son. He knew that. So after I put the house up for sale, it sold almost away. I mean, to me, God's working in all these steps. Like, it's way beyond my wildest conception that any of this stuff is happening. Even the fact that I had the desire to sell my home I had known so many guys that lived out in the woods. I lived in California when I was younger, that they build this thing. They start when they're in their 20s or 30s, and then it becomes their entire life.
Yeah.
Right. And women, children, relationships, nothing matters more than this little security box that they've built around themselves. And I was seeing that happening to me. I was like, as beautiful as this is, I had a native trout run in my front yard, a bridge. I planted fruit trees that were starting to fruit. You know, I had been there for a while. Yeah. It was a raw forest, and I made it like this, you know, permaculture thing. Everybody loved it. Nobody could believe that I was selling it, but I felt like I had to do that. If I didn't do that, there was no way I would be, and this is crazy, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's just what I needed. But like to be able to go to one of my son's, you know, performances at school,
right,
in the middle of the day, to pick him up, to know who his teachers are, to talk to him. You know, I didn't want that kind of relationship with my son. I wanted to like, oh, we're talking about the kids in class. I know them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, so I had to do that to move up here, and it was hard. Vermont, you know, if you're not from Vermont, you're considered a flatlander. So there's a lot of pushback there. I had an agent try to smear me out for being a flatlander on a social media group, and you know, just so happened that day, my son was snoring, napping as I'm reading this on my chest. I took a video of him snoring on my chest, and I put this long post about, you know, this is who I am. This is why I'm here. This is how I got here. And I thought we were way past, you know, giving merit to people based on where their parents were born.
Right.
You know? So, but yeah. So I get emotional talking about it all. But